The journey has been long and difficult, but the final resolution is finally within your reach today. Stay with us as we piece together the last bit of the puzzle and reveal the final truth. Click subscribe now and witness the most important ending of our cinematic arc.
Hello and welcome. I'm glad you're here today, because what I'm about to share with you is something I've never spoken out loud before. Not to my neighbor, not to my doctor, not even to the pastor at my church, but somehow, talking to you feels right. So pull up a chair. This is going to take a while. I said nothing when my daughter-in-law dropped my father's pocket watch into the kitchen trash can. I just stood there in the doorway of my own son's house, watching the lid swing shut, and I felt something go very cold and very quiet inside me. She didn't see me standing there. Neither did my son. I walked back to my car, sat down, and gripped the steering wheel for a long time. Then I drove home, and I started thinking, my name is not important. What matters is that I am 64 years old. I spent 31 years working as a civil engineer in Columbus, Ohio. I raised one son, my son, whom I will call Derek after his mother passed from cancer when Derek was 11. I cooked every meal. I attended every school play, every baseball game, every parent-teacher conference. I took on extra projects on weekends, so Derek could go to the college he wanted. I did all of it without complaint, because that is what a father does. Derek grew up sharp and ambitious. He earned a finance degree, landed a position at a wealth management firm in Chicago, and by 32 he was doing very well for himself. I was proud, genuinely proud. The kind of pride that fills your chest when you know the person you raised turned out decent and capable. Then he married his wife. I will call her Vanessa. Vanessa is beautiful, polished, and utterly convinced that the world exists to accommodate her preferences. She grew up wealthy in Naperville. Her father owns a chain of medical supply companies. She has never, not once in the 7 years I have known her, asked me a single question about my life. Not about my work, my health, my memories, or my father. She speaks to me the way a person speaks to a hotel concierge, polite, efficient, forgettable. My son changed after the wedding. Gradually, the way a river changes course so slowly you don't notice until one day you look up and realize the water is somewhere else entirely. He stopped calling on Sundays. He started flying his in-laws out for holidays, instead of driving the 4 hours to visit me. When I came to Chicago for Derek's 35th birthday dinner, Vanessa seated me at the far end of the table next to her aunt, a woman who spoke only about her Pilates instructor. Derek spent the evening laughing loudly with Vanessa's father and his business associates. I drove home the next morning before anyone woke up. I told myself it was fine. People build new lives. That is what children are supposed to do. What I could not make peace with was what was happening to my granddaughter. My granddaughter, I will call her Lily, is 8 years old, and the most earnest human being I have ever met. She has her father's dark eyes and her grandmother's habit of tilting her head to one side when she is thinking hard about something. She loves cardinals and chapter books and the way thunderstorms sound from inside a warm house. She is exactly the kind of child who reminds you why any of this matters. Vanessa enrolled Lily in French lessons, competitive gymnastics, and a private enrichment program on Saturdays. Lily's schedule was managed like a corporate calendar. I would call to speak with her and Vanessa would say, very pleasantly, that Lily was at an activity and she would have her call me back. Lily rarely called back. I do not blame Lily for that. The last time I visited, Lily ran to me at the door and held onto my jacket for a long moment without saying anything. When I looked down at her face, she looked tired in a way that 8-year-olds should not look tired. I brought her something that day. I brought her my father's pocket watch. Let me tell you about that watch. My father, Lily's great-grandfather, was a watchmaker. Not a hobbyist. A craftsman. He ran a small repair shop in Dayton for 40 years. The kind of place with a glass case full of other people's treasured things and a smell of machine oil and cedar wood that I can still recall exactly if I close my eyes. He was a quiet man, patient and precise, and he put those qualities into everything he touched. When I was 7 years old, he made me a pocket watch by hand. Not assembled from parts made, He carved the case from a piece of walnut that had been a fence post on his own father's farm. He fitted the movement himself. On the back, he engraved 4 words in letters, so small you needed good light to read them. For the long road. He gave it to me on the morning of my first day of school. He pressed it into my palm and said, "Your great-grandfather walked a long road to give us this life. So will you. This will remind you." I carried that watch every day for 30 years. It was with me when I got my engineering license. It was with me when Derek was born. It was with me on the morning of my wife's funeral. I kept it in a cedar box on my dresser after that. I could not carry it anymore without it hurting. But I kept it. When I decided to give it to Lily, it was not a sentimental impulse. It was a decision. I wanted her to have something that connected her to where she came from. Something that had nothing to do with schedules or performance or impressing anyone. Something that simply said, "You come from people who worked hard and loved deeply, and that means something." I drove to Chicago on a Saturday in October. I did not call ahead because I knew Vanessa would find a reason for it to be an inconvenient time. I brought the cedar box. I brought a card I wrote by hand explaining what the watch was and where it came from and why I wanted Lily to have it. Lily was home. She opened the box very carefully. The way she handles things she senses are important. She lifted the watch and turned it over and read the engraving and looked up at me with those serious eyes and said, "Great-grandpa made this?" "He made it with his own hands," I said. "For me. And now it's yours." She held it against her chest for a moment. Just held it there. That was 4 months before her mother threw it in the trash. I found out what happened because Lily told me herself. She called me from her school iPad on a Tuesday afternoon, the only device Vanessa didn't monitor, and she was whispering, so her voice was very small. But I could hear everything she said. She told me that her parents had hosted a cocktail party the previous Friday. Vanessa's father and several of his business partners were there, along with people from Derek's firm. Lily had been instructed to stay in her room, but she had come downstairs for a glass of water and brought the pocket watch with her because she had been showing it to a friend over video chat and hadn't put it back yet. Vanessa saw the watch in Lily's hand at the bottom of the stairs. According to Lily, Vanessa looked at it and said, "What is that old thing?" Lily told her it was the watch Great-Grandpa made, that it was special, that Grandpa gave it to her. Vanessa said, "Sweetie, we don't need dusty old things cluttering up the house." She took the watch from Lily's hand, walked to the kitchen, and dropped it in the trash can under the counter. She then told Lily to go back upstairs and not come down again until the guests had left. Lily waited until everyone was gone to look for the watch. By then, the kitchen trash had been emptied into the garage bin. She dug through it, she told me. She found the cedar box, but not the watch. She thought maybe the watch had slipped out when the bag was carried out, and she looked in the garage bin too, but she couldn't find it. She was crying quietly when she told me this. The kind of crying where a child has already been crying for several days and doesn't have much sound left. I told her I was very glad she called me. I told her she had done nothing wrong. I told her I would take care of it. I said nothing else. I hung up the phone and sat in my kitchen for a very long time. The next morning I drove to Chicago. I did not call Derek. I parked down the street from the house and I waited until I saw Derek's car leave. He left early on Wednesdays for a standing breakfast meeting. Then I rang the doorbell. Vanessa answered in her workout clothes, a coffee mug in her hand, her expression moving through surprise, and then something that was not quite welcome. "This is unexpected," she said. "I'd like to check your trash," I said. "I believe something of mine was thrown away by accident." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "The pocket watch. My father made it by hand. I gave it to Lily. I understand it was discarded last Friday. I'd like to look for it before the garbage collection comes." A very careful look passed over her face. "I really don't think." "I'm not asking for your permission," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm telling you what I'm going to do. You can come with me, or you can go back to your coffee." She let me in, which surprised me. She followed me to the kitchen without speaking. I opened the cabinet under the sink and looked in the trash can. Empty, recently emptied. I asked about the garage bin. She said it had been collected Monday. She watched me with her arms crossed while I processed that information. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said, in the same tone she might use to respond to mildly inconvenient news. I looked at her for a moment. "Are you?" I left without another word. I sat in my car again, and I thought about my father's hands and the walnut fence post, and 4 words engraved in letters you needed good light to read. Then I called a man named Gerald. Gerald Henderson has been repairing watches and clocks in the same shop in Dayton for 52 years. He was my father's apprentice for the last 8 years of my father's working life. He is 81 years old and still goes into the shop every Tuesday and Thursday because, as he puts it, he doesn't know what else to do with himself. He was at my father's funeral. He was at my wife's funeral. He is one of perhaps 4 people in the world I would trust with anything. I told Gerald what happened. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said, "Did the garbage truck already come?" "Monday," I said. "Which service?" I told him. He said, "The West Side processing facility for that route is the Midway Center on Archer. They hold residential loads for 10 days before compaction if there's no contamination. That's city contract. Your father made me that watch's twin, you know. Identical case. I know exactly what we're looking for. I want to be honest with you." When Gerald said that, something shifted in my chest that I hadn't felt in a long time. I drove to Dayton that afternoon. Gerald made calls. He had contacts, old men who had repaired the clocks in the offices of city buildings for decades and knew everyone in every municipal department. By Thursday morning, we had a contact at the Midway facility and permission to go through the residential sort from Derek's collection route before it went to compaction. We found the watch on a Friday morning. It was in the second bag we opened. The cedar box was not with it, that must have been lost or separated, but the watch itself was there, still closed, with a thin coat of kitchen grime on the case. Gerald wiped it with a cloth from his jacket pocket, turned it over, tilted it toward the light coming through the facility's high windows, and read the engraving. He handed it to me without speaking. I held it in my palm, and I thought about my father, and I thought about Lily, and I thought about what it means to come from somewhere and belong to something, and how some people spend their whole lives trying to buy their way out of that feeling, while other people spend their whole lives trying to hold on to it. Then I thought about something else. When I was in Derek's kitchen looking through the trash, I had noticed something on the counter that I had not mentioned to Vanessa. A folder, manila, unmarked, sitting beside the fruit bowl. It was open about an inch, and I could see the top edge of a document inside. What I could see of the letterhead read, "Hartwell and Cross, Estate and Trust Attorneys." I had said nothing, but I had not forgotten it. My own attorney, a man named Paul, who has handled my affairs for 15 years, is not a dramatic person. When I called him and described what I had seen, he asked me a few careful questions and then told me to come in at the end of the week. He also told me to bring every document related to my estate, my late wife's estate, and anything involving my father's property. I brought everything. Paul went through it with his reading glasses low on his nose and his pen moving in small, slow circles the way it does when he is concentrating. After about 40 minutes, he set his pen down and looked at me over his glasses. "Has Derek been in contact with your father's estate records?" he asked. "I don't see how," I said. "They're in my files. Has he ever had access to your home?" "Unsupervised access." I thought about it. Derek had a key. He had used it twice in the past 3 years when I was traveling, and he'd needed to pick up mail. The second time had been 8 months ago. Paul nodded slowly. He told me that based on what I was describing, it was worth having a full title search done on my father's commercial property in Dayton, the building that had housed his watch shop, which I had inherited and which I rented to a small bookstore. He also suggested I check on a land parcel my father had owned outside Miamisburg that I had largely forgotten about. The title search took 9 days. On the 10th day, Paul called me and asked me to come in again. His voice was careful the way it is when he has news that requires sitting down. I sat down. The land parcel outside Miamisburg, 12 acres of flat, unremarkable farmland that my father had purchased in 1971. For almost nothing, had been quietly under contract for partial option rights for 14 months. The option had been initiated by a holding company called Verimark Land Partners LLC. Verimark, when traced through its registration documents, listed a managing partner whose name I did not recognize. But Paul had dug further. The registered agent for Verimark was a law firm, Hartwell and Cross, my son's wife's father's attorney. I sat with that information for a long moment. The 12 acres outside Miamisburg, Paul explained to me, lay directly adjacent to a corridor that a regional logistics company had been quietly acquiring land along for the past 2 years. Industry sources Paul had done. His homework estimated that corridor land was selling at between $40,000 and $60,000 per acre in private negotiations. My father's 12 acres, which I had never thought about in any real sense, were worth somewhere between $480,000 and $720,000, potentially more, depending on negotiations. And someone had been moving to tie up the option rights on that land, my inherited land through a company that traced back to my daughter-in-law's family attorney, without my knowledge and without my consent. I asked Paul how that was possible. He said it was not yet clear. There were scenarios involving forged authorization or clerical manipulation that he wanted to investigate further before drawing conclusions. What was clear was that the option contract referenced a signature that was meant to be mine, and it was not my signature. I want to be honest with you again. I have spent my entire life being a careful, measured person. I am an engineer. I believe in examining evidence before reaching conclusions. I believe in solving problems through systems and patience rather than anger. But sitting in that chair in Paul's office, I felt something I had not felt since the morning of my wife's funeral, when I understood fully and finally that she was not coming back. A grief that is also a fury. A love turned inside out. I thought about my father in his shop with the smell of cedar and machine oil. I thought about Lily digging through the trash in the garage, looking for something that connected her to him. I thought about my son at the far end of that dinner table, laughing with men who saw my family as a line item. And I thought about a pocket watch sitting in my shirt pocket right now with 4 words on the back. For the long road. Paul filed a formal fraud complaint with the Ohio Attorney General's office. He also contacted the county recorder to freeze any further action on the Miamisburg parcel pending investigation. He advised me, firmly, not to contact Derek or Vanessa directly. I did not contact them directly. What I did was call Lily. She answered on the second ring. I asked her how she was doing. She told me about a book she was reading, about a cardinal she had seen on the fire escape, about a dream she had about a clock tower. She did not ask me about the watch, and I understood that she was being careful. She is 8 years old, and she is already learning to be careful. And that broke my heart more than anything else in this story. I told her I had found Great-Grandpa's watch. She went very quiet. Then she said, "You did?" "I did," I said. "Gerald and I found it together. It's safe." She let out a breath that I could hear clearly through the phone. A small breath, but it carried a lot of weight. "Grandpa," she said. "I know," I said. "I want to tell you what happened next. But I need you to understand something first. I did not do what I did for money. I want to be clear about that. The land, the value, the legal process, all of that matters, and all of that will be resolved properly and justly. Paul is a thorough man, and the law, when it moves, tends to move toward accuracy. What I did next, I did for Lily. I drove back to Chicago one more time. Derek was home this time. I had texted him, not called. Texted, and asked him to be there. He was in the living room when I arrived, Vanessa beside him on the couch, both of them wearing the particular expression of people who have been conferring about what to expect. I sat down across from them. I set the pocket watch on the coffee table between us. I set a folder beside it, a copy of Paul's preliminary findings, the title search results, the Verimark registration documents, the Hartwell and Cross connection. Derek looked at the watch. He looked at the folder. He looked at me. "Dad," he said. "Let me finish," I said. I talked for about 15 minutes. I did not raise my voice. I explained what Paul had found. I explained what the land was worth. I explained the legal process that was now underway and what its likely conclusions were. I explained that I had made new arrangements, recently updated for my estate, and that those arrangements now reflected a clearer understanding of the people in my life and their priorities. Vanessa's face went through several expressions. She settled on a very controlled version of composure that I recognized as someone calculating. Derek looked like a man watching something he built a long time ago fall down. "I want to say one more thing," I said, "and it has nothing to do with land or money or attorneys." I looked at my son. "Your grandfather made that watch by hand. He made it for me. I gave it to your daughter because I wanted her to know where she came from. She is 8 years old, and she dug through your garage trash looking for it because she understood, even at 8, that some things matter more than appearances. I would like you to think about what that says about her, and what it says about this house, and what kind of man you intend to be for the rest of her life." Derek said nothing, but his jaw moved, and I saw something cross his face that I had not seen in a long time. Something young and ashamed and real. I stood up. I picked up the watch and put it in my jacket pocket. "The watch stays with me for now," I said. "When I believe it's safe with Lily, I'll bring it back to her." I drove home to Columbus. I made a pot of coffee. I sat on the back porch and listened to the neighborhood settle into evening. And I thought about my father and what he would make of all of this. He was not a man who expressed much, but he had given me a watch with 4 words on it. And he had been right. It is a long road. The legal process is ongoing. Paul tells me the fraud investigation will likely conclude within 6 to 8 months. The option contract has been voided pending the investigation findings. The land is mine. Clearly and fully. What happens to it will be my decision and no one else's. Derek called me 3 weeks after that meeting. We talked for almost an hour. It was not an easy conversation, and I will not pretend it resolved everything. But he called. He was the one who called. And somewhere inside that fact is something I am choosing to hold on to. Lily called me on a Sunday. She asked if she could come visit for spring break. She said her mom and dad said it was okay if I wanted her. I told her I would pick her up myself. She asked if Gerald could come over and show her how to wind the watch properly. I told her I thought Gerald would like nothing better in the world. There is something I want to say to you before I go, because some of you listening to this are fathers, and some of you are grandfathers, and some of you are sitting somewhere right now feeling like the life you built quietly and carefully has been overlooked by people who should have known better. Do not throw anything away. Not your history, not your patience, not your dignity, and especially not the things your own father put into your hands. The people who dismiss those things are usually the ones who need them most, and they often don't find that out until it's almost too late. My father made a pocket watch from a fence post and a piece of purpose. He gave it to a 7-year-old boy on a long road and told him it would be worth something someday. He was right about that. He was right about everything. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this story reached you somewhere, I hope you'll let me know in the comments below. And if you know someone who needs to hear it, please pass it along. I'll see you in the next one.